welcome everybody, and thank you for coming out on a Friday night as it starts to get dark. And really excited to actually have people in this room to talk to about this. Wasn't sure whether it was be of any value to anyone or whether no one would show up at all. But greatly appreciative. So I'm Kevin Cannon. I'm from right up on New Prospect Road. My family's been here for decades. I've been gardening people have been paying me to garden for 17 years now. So
That's wonderful work.
I'm slowly getting better at it.
To put in gardens, is that what you do, or?
At this point, I design gardens and put in gardens and things like that as well.
Yeah, do you
but
do garden work for people?
I do.
Yeah, I'm not comment.
Well,
Kevin, you
We'll
have to turn up the
address-
volume.
okay, so I'll talk louder. But yeah, so I've had an opportunity to do work in all sorts of gardens, from completely ornamental and formal ones to completely productive and veggie and fruit-based ones.
Our bushes.
Oh yeah, I'm the one that does the balls out front. But I am. Oh, also, I should put this out. I'm taking a new medication for epilepsy that has kind of messed with my short-term memory, and so if I wind up going at certain points, just pardon me. I also haven't given a talk to a group in like a really, really long time, so you can sense a little bit of nervousness, but
Not
give
really.
me
You're coming along really good.
okay.
It's
Give me a
not-
half an
it's
hour
not
and
trouble.
I'll be flowing like that. That's shouldn't be a problem.
And if you are, we'll just kick it.
I thought was normal.
Yeah. That's very true.
But I've been back here, and mostly because I've had a chance to garden in places like Vermont and California and Colorado and a bunch of very, very different climates. I love it here the most. I love where we live. We have just the right amount of cold, just the right amount of warmth, and even though it gets cold, it doesn't get northern Vermont cold, and even though it gets hot, it doesn't get Georgia hot. And so we can just live in this beautiful band.
Question, you lived in all those places
Yeah.
that you just mentioned?
Yeah, for periods of time.
You don't look like you're over 25.
Thank you. 38, so I'm coming up on that. But as a result, during the winter time, we do run into some challenges that if you go further north and everything just freezes, then everything just freezes. It's completely frozen for the entire season or for the winter time, and then when it thaws out in spring, everything's fine. And when it's in a place where the ground doesn't freeze at all, the ground just doesn't freeze, and so protection is a completely different issue. Whereas we live in that band that is both magnificent and has both of those. And so, as you've all experienced, we have those seasons where it is frozen solid throughout the entire winter. We get feet of snow that'll be there, and then it really doesn't thaw out until spring. And then we have those other seasons, like 2 of the last 3, where it might be harsh at times, but the actual soil doesn't freeze at all. And it can be very challenging to plants because it's this heaving and moving of the soil. And so today, gonna run through, or keep it mostly to the practical things that you can do in order to help protect and winterize the garden. Don't want to get too into the weeds on too much of the science and stuff like that, but more the concepts. And then if there's at any point I use a term or say something that you just need some clarification on it, feel free to toss your hand up and just interrupt me. But if you have any questions that are more focused on your own personal gardens and things like that that might not apply to everybody, then we'll just save that till the end, and I can answer all those things. We have a small group, so this is a nice dynamic.
Do you have existing gardens?
Oh yeah, that was the next question. It's
Oh,
like,
gee.
so give me an idea of like what.
Good
It's all good.
question.
Thank you. It was the perfect question for the moment. Thanks. But to get an idea, so who is a gardener? Who has gardens? just by a show of hands?
I love it, but I can't do it as much as I used to.
Okay, it's
Ours
It
are very
happens, it's
small
tough.
because I'm intimidated to put things
bring
in
it.
yeah.
okay. That's
So
That's
they're,
okay.
she would go and plant, we live together, that's my mom. She would like a lot more out there, but I get intimidated.
a step at a time.
Yeah.
You know,
No, I have
slowly
a
gets bigger.
small garden.
It's getting bigger. It's getting bigger.
The flower gardens are getting bigger. My main garden is humongous with the greenhouse. So,
We've got a container.
Container
Container
gardens?
gardening, wherever there's sun, we've got trees all over the place,
Oh, okay.
houses. So it's wherever the sun is, we got containers.
Okay. And so, and then it's a mixture of kind of ornamentals and veggies, or mostly just if containers, probably veggies or
It's
a mix.
We
Of,
have a mix.
Okay.
Both.
So then, yeah. So we'll talk about all this stuff. But if everything, but it's all smaller scale things. Nobody has gardens that are an
No.
acre or anything like that.
No.
Okay, perfect. So the biggest thing in terms of winter protection is actually protecting the soil. The most important part of your garden and containers and anything that you're growing in is actually the soil and the life that exists in that soil. This is the time of year, especially herbaceous perennials start getting rid of, or they pull all their energy into their roots. And what you're trying to do for winter protection is to put it to bed for the season. And the more that you're able to keep the life, or the more that the life actually stays active and alive within your soil, or even within containers, especially larger ones, the more ready the soil will be come springtime to accept new plants. It will have, usually there'll be worms or something working their way through when it's not frozen, so they're actually adding fertility the entire time. And that really is accomplished mostly through mulch, various forms of mulch. And depending upon whether you're doing it on the ground, and I'm sure you've all seen people like wood mulch tends to be very popular, straw mulch, those sorts of things. You really just want to kind of put a blanket over the soil, and then that will, in general, protect the roots, or at least the lower structures of herbaceous perennials and things like that. There are select plants, especially if you're growing plants that are right at the edge of their zone. If you're trying to grow certain types of, maybe like an apricot or peaches or something here, that sometimes you'll need to actually wrap them a little bit, but it sounds as if nobody's probably growing any really out of zone plants.
Well, we have a couple of fig trees, but we bring them in the garage.
You have them in pots? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is
And
there
those-
any varieties that you could just leave in the ground?
If you actually can plant a Chicago hardy fig into the ground, but what'll happen is most years, unless you wrap the top and kind of put burlap and various things, it will, most years, it'll die back to the ground, but those root systems will then shoot back up a whole bunch of new growth, and that really, Chicago hardies and a couple of the northern hardy figs,
And you would get figs each year,
you would still get
You would
figs,
still get
yeah,
figs?
they would come
It's
a
just
little
a
bit
lot of work.
later.
bringing it in and out.
It is, and a
Yeah.
lot of fertility, a lot of like stuff needs to be added to it to keep it going. Okay, so then we don't have to get too into like wrapping fancy roses or anything like that.
that light flicks on and off. Is that going to bother you?
Which like,
The light all the way to the end of the wall.
oh, I'm okay. I haven't noticed it yet.
Okay.
So,
All right.
and if it does, I can toss on these.
Okay.
That'll be all good. Okay, so now the winterizing process. The first and most important thing, and you're all gardeners, you know this, that it kind of applies throughout the year, unfortunately, is pull weeds. Like, the very first step to winterizing is you go through and you get rid of any sort of weeds, that persistent and irritating weeds, because if you leave them, all that they're going to do is drop their seeds right down in the same spot. And if it's a plant that you don't want there, even if it's dried out, even if you try to just get whatever you can, The other part is, especially for veggie beds, containers, especially for veggie beds. Right now, there's all the cool season weeds that are starting to pop up. You know, you'll see, and it's odd that plants actually start growing at this time of the year, but usually they get about to this size, and then come springtime, they're ready to explode, and that's the first batch of weeds that we all have to face. If you get them now, even though they're small and insignificant, and can just kind of like, you know, scrape the top or something like that, it'll save you a lot of work come springtime. And also to try to, with any perennial roots, if you can get the roots, just because they will, or with perennial weeds, I should say, I'm sorry, perennial roots get the roots. So dandelions and dock, you know, it's been a long day. Anything that you can get is just going to make your life easier, especially in a cultivated garden bed, or even in containers when there's weeds present in the containers. For your ornamental herbaceous perennials, which anything from echinacea to anything that greens up and then comes back year after year after year, this could be peonies, all sorts of things. Luckily, there's not going to be any comment section on the YouTube video, and so I don't have to worry about people going, well, my opinion.
Yes.
Yes, oh no, not on the video. Because this is there's a lot of different opinions on how you should go about it in the fall. You'll see a lot of people recommend, and a lot of landscaping crews at this time of year, they go through and just kind of chop everything to the ground and put down a layer of mulch. For the small garden, especially if you're trying to encourage native wildlife in it, or teeny tiny wildlife.
I was gonna say we're mad for deer this year.
We're trying to keep out the macrofauna and bring in the microfauna. But a lot of those native pollinators, and from pollinators to fireflies to salamanders and all the cute little things that we find in the gardens, they're really reliant upon a lot of that debris. To try to make it sound
The
a
plant
little bit
debris or mulch?
plant debris.
Oh.
And so when those leaves collapse in the fall, or there's that little patch of whatever it is, oftentimes at this time of the year, if you actually pull one of those things back, you'll see all sorts of normal little insects, but a lot of eggs get laid down there. And that while in that mix of eggs, and this is the reason that people oftentimes just bring everything down and get rid of it, there will be, we'll go pest eggs, or things that are less desirable in that same patch of, well, not greenery, but brownery, I guess, at this point. Most of the things that will actually be in there are the sorts of, they're eggs for insects that then will prey upon and consume and actually keep any undesirable eggs that might be in there under control. And so maintaining the ecosystem of the garden in order to have those beneficial predatory insects the next year that come and actually take care of the irritating ones for us, the more debris that you can leave in the garden, the better. Not to say, and I don't want to say that as if just leave everything in there, but select patches where it's just things, the grass that you let grow a little bit high, and that you just don't worry about in the same way, or let it collapse, and then things can actually like survive under there for the winter time. So what I do with that is that any of my herbaceous perennials, if they were diseased during the season, this year seemed to be, it wasn't horrible, but it was pretty bad for powdery mildew. So if anyone grows any bee balm or phlox, or if anyone grew any squashes this year, or cucurbits, melons, that sort of thing, you probably saw the powdery white stuff that just starts showing over top of all the
We
leaves.
had more trouble with those squash ones.
Oh, yeah.
Vine borers.
Yeah, the perennial, vine borers are one of the reasons I don't grow many zucchini.
I didn't have any. And I got a ton of zucchinis this year.
Well, you
and
should have called us up.
well, I will next year.
I didn't get any either, this year or last year.
Cause you get the the bugs on there, those
No.
squash bugs?
No.
I mean, last year we got 15, honey, butternut, and, this year we got 4 butternut and 6 acorn.
Yeah, I didn't have any problem with the zucchinis.
Every year.
Yeah, I think
And when I had zucchinis,
as long as the actual little moth and or butterfly isn't around,
yeah.
and you know, we just where I am or our little spot, there's a lot of them. It seems like
So
you guys
you're
probably
saying
have a lot of them too.
leave the roots there, just cut it down to the ground?
Well, for the herbaceous perennials, anything that is going to be coming back the next year, obviously you just leave the roots in the ground. In terms of the veggie garden, usually I would for almost every, like all squashes certainly, I pull up any sort of most of the nightshades, certainly definitely tomatoes. Sometimes I'll leave peppers or things in. A lot of it has to do with how diseased the plant itself was. And so if you had a squash patch where it actually was okay and there wasn't lots of disease, you're gonna still want to get it out, but it's not essential that you get the roots out. Whereas if you had a squash patch where they all wilted because those little borers got into it, you want to make sure to get all of that root and any sort of disease material out of the garden.
Yeah.
But then if you, let's say you have a patch of or a pot full of echinacea or something like that, and that it got it just looked beautiful the whole season. It's a perennial. It's going to be coming back the next year. Then it's not quite as important because a lot of echinacea is just on my mind now. That things like that, you'll get birds in the garden throughout the season or throughout the winter time because they come and feed on them, and you can bring in a lot of wildlife by leaving both allowing them to sleep there as well as bringing in birds and all sorts of things to feed on seeds. But a lot of that does come down to your own gardens and what you want it to look like. How many stalks do you want sticking up? Where I personally like iris stalks, the things that they leave at the very end of the season, where the leaves all eventually collapse down and they leave these little bushy things, but it's a nice straight stalk that gets really black and then has this little kind of shaped seed head up at the top, and when the snow falls, clusters of them. I love the way that they look. There's plenty of people who think that they look awful, and that's what all it. You can leave them, and that things will live in them. Again, for people on YouTube, you're gonna see all. If there's a comment section, which there really shouldn't. It's just not.
There's always a comment section.
Well, unless you say comments have been disabled, in which
Well,
case there is no longer. A
We'll have to tell Ed to disable the comments.
I think, but the common advice that you'll see of get rid of it all, tear it out, bring that really is based on the potential of some sort of bad thing being in there, but never really considering all of the good stuff that also hangs out in there. So like beans, for example, I never pull my beans out of the ground or any legumes, peas or anything like that. I'll always cut them right at the base and allow the roots to stay in there, because on the roots is where you have all those little nodules that are covered in nitrogen, and then if you pull it out, you just pull all the fertility out. And otherwise, if you can just let it rot in, and this is the same with all roots, the more that you can let it just stay in the soil, and actually at this time of year too, the more roots you can have in the soil, whether they're fully alive or whether they recently died and are still holding it in place, the less that soil, and whether it be in a pot or in the ground, or well, I guess those are really kind of our two options. It'll cause everything will heave less, because those roots are holding things in place. And whereas you'll find, and you may have seen it in pots and in garden beds, that when you pull roots out of them and you leave it as bare soil at about this time of year, the soil does all these weird things during the winter time, that you'll get icicles forming on top, and there's cracks that'll form into it, And the more that there's either like roots or some sort of covering to actually keep it from this like constant freeze thaw cycle, the better off it'll be.
Okay, let me just quite clarify what I think you
I
said.
realize I go all over
Alright, so
the
we're going
place.
to go in and we will leave some of the roots because they're nutrient for the soil, right?
In
And
the
they're,
in the
these are
veggie
little
garden.
things coming, so we can cut them down, leave a little bit of it.
Mhm.
Now spring comes and we go to start to plant our garden, so we remove those old roots, do we?
Some of them won't have broken down by then.
Mhm.
Many times, since you're always rotating crops from bed to bed, if you're not planting a crop in that bed, or if the crop that you're planting in that bed isn't in the same exact arrangement, or there's slightly different distance between, I just leave the roots into the next season.
Alright.
Because they just slowly rot out, and the worms will go after them, and the fungi. Usually, roots, it's fungi has to get at it because they're a little bit more woody. But it's just a packet of nutrients that the plants over that season. And there's some I found peppers sometimes can be a real pain, especially like the really really hot peppers. They have this really woody base that if you leave that in, it does break down, but I find that usually by the end of that next year, I'm frustrated enough that I go, you're coming out, and rip it out anyway. Yeah, in general, at this time of year, the less that you turn up the soil, the better it'll be, and whether that be through fully ripping up roots, with the exception of weeds,
Okay.
because a lot of weeds, you just don't want those seeds the next year, otherwise it's 15 to 20 years worth of seeds sometimes.
No, I was told recently that because I was out raking leaves, and I live right next to the woods, so I just dump all the leaves in the woods. And I was told that is very good. These leaves, when they get wet, they're very good for the soil, and or put it around trees and so forth. Is that true?
That is not only true, but it is number 6 on my list.
Oh,
So we're on.
okay.
I think we're drifting between 2, 3, and 4, kind of all at the same time.
Alright.
Yes, leaves are one of the most amazing resources that we have around this area. It's one of the reasons that I was so happy that we were able to start this now, is because I can actually say to folks,
Leave the leaves.
or gather them, chip them up as much as you possibly can. If you just want mulch and you just want to kill something out, you can leave them whole. But the best way to do it is gather them, chip them, whether you run them over with a mower or throw them through one of those shredder things. And usually, if you have the space, I gather them into fairly large rings, but it can be all the way down. And they will, even just if you just let them sit, in about 2.5 to 3 years, you will have amazing compost and mulch that can be tossed around, because the worms pretty much just work it all the way through. But I will let you in on a secret, that if you apply a nitrogen source, the reason that it takes so long for the leaves to break down is because it's mostly carbon present in there, and there needs to be a lot or more nitrogen in order to cause the actual breakdown of the organic material. So if you pour a high nitrogen content liquid over the top of it, you can actually turn leaves, by the next fall, it turns into some of the most beautiful compost you'll ever see. It's just deep black, filled with worms. I guess you could kind of use whatever. It's pea. If you're if you're comfortable,
Pink? Pea.
you're
How about chicken poop?
chicken poop works. It might have weed seeds in it. That would be the only thing that you'll wind up with a slightly different. The nice part about leaf compost is that it tends to be fungally dominant. Because it's more fungi is required in order to break down the leaves, and so there's the balance of bacteria to fungi in that final compost leans towards fungal.
I shouldn't put the chicken poop in there.
Oh, you can. Oh, you absolutely can. And then you would wind up somewhere closer, whereas then there's
You absolutely can.
Wondering
You'll
what
want-
to do with my poop.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That's a
and
good-
nitrogen and chicken.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It burns really hot, and so
Right.
if you have a lot of chicken coop to get rid of,
I hate
then just layer it in with those leaves. Especially, I would recommend still chipping down the leaves as much as possible, and then just layer it in. And by next year, you'll have beautiful, beautiful compost because those are two
You could
really
just
nice
make like
amendments.
a ring out of chicken wire or something. doesn't
That's
have to be-
usually what I do.
Right, yeah.
Yep. Or some sort of fencing, and
Mhm.
it can be as small or as big as you want it to be. The larger you get, once you get to about 3 feet across or something, that's the size that, yeah, it just chews through a lot more organic material a lot faster, but you can do it on any scale. As you've probably noticed, if you just leave a pile of weeds just sitting there for long enough, and I would imagine we've probably all done that at some. I know I do it all the time.
I'm like, I'm gonna get rid of that.
And even if it's only this tall and this far around, it's amazing how fast things start to break down. And but yeah, leaves, they are, for our area, the most useful thing for a gardener that everybody throws away. And that being able to start this talk series, because I'm hoping to make this for maybe every 2 months for like the rest of the year, just talking about different topics at different times. The fall and the winterizing of the garden is really the start of next season. So like for me, or how I've come to think of it, this is the start of the next season because it's when you're putting in bulbs and getting ready for those things that come springtime will make you really happy and excited. And leaves are, if you started a gardening like series or talks in springtime, all you can really say to people is, oh, what a shame you didn't gather all of those leaves in the fall, because if you had them, you would have a yard worth of free compost. And then, but being able to start and actually say to people now, save as many leaves as you can, break them down as fine as you can, and if you feel comfortable with it, if you gather urine into a bucket or something like that, it's very high nitrogen, it's easily accessible at all times, and but yeah, so it's one of those ones that I just. So anyway, but they are useful, and they can shorten the period until it eventually turns into a nice compost. Mulching, because yeah, leaves tie into that. Mulch in the perennial gardens, I've seen recommendations ranging like from 1 to like 5+ inches of mulch put onto things. Exactly. And you'll see, over the internet, you'll see even wider things. I usually, if I'm establishing a perennial bed around here, or trying where it's the first layer of mulch and it's something that I want to keep there and just refresh every year for things, I'll usually start off with like maybe 3 to 4 inches or something like that will settle down. But then after that, the maintenance of it, if each year you're applying more, it shouldn't really be more than 1 to 2 inches. One of the big reasons, and maybe even if I say this word, I'll see the reaction on everyone's face. Voles. Oh, okay. No, then you haven't faced voles yet. We have these little critters around called voles. They live anywhere from like maybe an inch down into the soil to about an inch above the soil. They're always just tunneling. They go all winter. And mulch, a thick enough mulch, is heaven for them. So if you put them around sorts of trees or anywhere in your garden, they'll just make their little tunnels through it.
I thought they were under the lawn. Do they go under the lawn? I've seen like the tunnels, I thought.
Well, moles.
Oh, moles and voles are different?
They are.
Okay.
They are. Moles go into the ground
Are
and
they
usually.
the grubs? Do they eat grubs? Do you have grubs in your lawn? That's when you have them?
I think so.
Yeah. I thought they were the same thing.
And then you'll usually see mole hills as well. Like they'll have exit spaces from the ground where it kind of makes these little mounds. Voles are the ones where when you go out in the springtime and the snow melts away or finally melts away, and you see those those swirly patterns going through the snow. Has anyone ever seen those?
Yes, I know it.
It's like you get down to about here, and then all of a sudden you'll just see these, or not all of a sudden, it'll just be crisscrossed with these really complex patterns, and those are voles. And voles, they are the reason that mulch becomes really thick mulch. Because if we lived in another part of the country, or if you don't have voles, really you can put a pretty thick mulch, and then you don't really ever deal with weeds, because there's no critters, burrowing around underneath. But if you do have voles, and in our region we tend to have there's a lot of them around. So again, 3 to 4 inches, and then like maintaining, but each year it's only maybe an inch or 2 inches. It's just to kind of make things look nicer, add a little bit more organic material that starts to break down, keeps things fertilized. And leaves, like we were just talking about, are one of the best mulches. For any sort, if you have broadleaf trees in your landscape at all, maples and oaks and all those sorts of things, it's the best mulch that you can use, because it is technically the mulch that they drop for themselves every year. And if you can take it, chip it up, and then kind of concentrate it around those bases, it'll help to keep down weeds and all those sorts of things. Trimming and pruning, like shrubs and those sorts of things. Whereas the things that are little, you can pretty much just knock them to the ground, because the herbaceous perennials that turn brown, they're green all season, and then they just die back to the ground. Those can be cleaned down. Shrubs and trees, this is one of the worst times of year to trim things off or whatever it is, just because we're about to move into the cold. So do any of you have shrubs or trees that you were thinking about pruning or trimming?
I just did.
You just did? Okay.
Firebush.
Well, it'll be, burning bush. There's some of these. There are shrubs out there where they're so tough that they'll be absolutely fine. It's not as if you're going to necessarily kill them. It's just that putting open wounds on a plant right before it moves into the cold. There's all sorts of both infection, if it does stay warm enough, as well as kind of freezing points and things like that. But again, it's not the end of the world. It's just that most things prefer trees. It's once the leaves are already off, and it's more towards the end of the winter.
Some kind of dressing you can put over the cut?
There are covers for a burning bush. You don't need to worry about it. It'll be the euonymus is a very, 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 very tough plant. That it'll be okay.
Forsythia.
Forsythia, if you cut those at this time of year, the only thing is you would lose the blossoms, because a lot of flowering shrubs, they set their flowers the year before in buds, and if you trim too far into the fall or into the winter time, it'll just
That forsythia in the front by the mailbox. It's like its arms keep reaching further and further into the middle of the road. I had to go cut the branches off because it overtook the mailbox.
Yeah, that is what they do.
See, I don't like forsythia.
Well, they have that. They have their show time.
Yeah, I'm going to show
time. And the rest of the year, they kind of,
Yeah, this
green.
thing. Yeah, green.
How about the hydrangeas? These always look nice. Do you ever trim them back?
So there's a bunch of different types of hydrangeas. These are bush hydrangeas, or most of them are bush hydrangeas. So they don't get cut back to the ground each year. They slowly shape out, and so the only things that really get removed from them are spent flower heads, and it's trimming a small shrub that slowly grows out, and then once it gets out to a certain point, then there'll be some shaping and stuff that I'll do. But there are types of hydrangeas that pretty much that either need to be trimmed back or either go back all the way to the ground. There's a lot of different hydrangeas. Those, it's just removing the dead flower heads, at least for the next probably 2 to 3 years.
We didn't get any flowers.
Yeah, we did. But not a lot of blooms. But you get that long sticky wood thing, and I'm never sure if I should cut that off or not, because they say it blooms on old wood. I'm like, well, is that the old wood or?
Well,
you know?
usually if you,
You know, all those
Old wood
brown
is all
things
about-
sticking out of there.
if it's dead, I mean, as soon as it's like anything that's dead, you can trim off and remove out if there's no more
But you don't
growth
want
on
to
it.
trim back anything that's green.
Not right now. And then also this time of year just isn't probably
do you
isn't
trim
the
it in the
best time.
spring? Are you supposed to do that? I mean,
I guess since I just don't really know what type of
which-
hydrangea
okay,
it is,
alright.
that's part of it. Like there's a bunch of different things. Yeah, usually I would do it earlier on because if it's only growing up to this and it's not getting too bushy, or is it
No,
getting
it's big,
bushy?
it's big.
It's big and bushy.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me talk to you about that a little bit later
Okay.
on. Yeah.
I'll bring you a picture of it next
Yes.
time.
So so the focus on the veggie garden. That all the general fall activities and things. So it's like hoses coming inside and getting all drained, and the pots or any pots that aren't being filled, they get emptied and dumped upside down. And tools is also a big, like at this time of year. My recommendation, like you still have time that any of your seeding trays or any of your pots that aren't going to be holding soil through the season, you still have this little window of time where pick a sunny day, go outside with the hose, and then just blast them down so that you don't get stuck in February or March possibly needing to actually scrub out seeding trays and sterilizing them and doing all those things that right now you can still just get most of that dirt off with a hose and save yourself a lot of time come springtime. And also to store them clean is good too.
Well, we do a lot of container gardens around, flowers on our back deck, but I usually don't dump the soil. I mean, I try to use it the next year. I just
Okay.
freshen it up. I mean, do you have to dump it or?
Nope,
Oh.
you do not have to dump it.
Do you add anything to it?
Well, I guess it all depends on the container, but usually each year you're going to be amending it a little bit, or depending upon what was grown there before and what you're growing there the next year, you're going to be amending it, usually adding some compost and other things, because container gardening is challenging, you will know, because it's like all of the nutrients have to be in that. It can't go reaching 5, sometimes 10 feet out to the side in order to find just that little bit of selenium or whatever it is. It all has to be in that container, or you have to provide it to it. And so, yeah, usually each year, if in any of the containers that I'm using, if it's annuals usually if it's annuals or biennials or something, I'll always be putting in a couple inches of compost and working it into the top. And if the soil was a little tough, maybe a little bit of peat or coir or something like that to lighten it up. And but yeah, usually the next year you're going to want to amend it. Otherwise, the only things that you would be able to grow in it a second year after, if you grew a crop that used up a bunch of nutrients from in it, the next year you could grow maybe petunias or something, and even they would kind of have a hard time. It's like things that don't need too much but can still flower. But yeah, most years you're gonna definitely want to add some, composted out manure or compost, and it'll keep the containers going for many years.
I use straight cow manure in my vegetable garden, and freshen it up every year, get new, and the nightshade's wonderful. I mean, they grow really big.
Yeah.
Is that too harsh on the vegetables?
Depending upon when you apply it. So if you apply it now,
Mm-hmm.
and then you just kind of let it sit over the winter time, or if it's manure that isn't fresh, that's actually that is at least sat there for in a big pile.
Oh,
for
it's
however
dry.
long,
It's dry.
then usually some of the harshest parts of it, and this is also talking about cow manure specifically.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay once it's calmed down a bit. But the best way really to do it is to still allow it to compost. So if you can get a lot of cow manure, or whether you can make a compost pile out of it, or you just let it sit for a while.
Yeah, we
to
do. We
just
keep it in
cool
a
down.
pile in the back.
Yeah, and if you give it at least. See, now I'm trying to quote them. Let it sit for a while to just mellow.
Mm-hmm.
but that cow manure is one of the least dangerous
Okay.
in the vegetable garden, and if it's had a little while to sit, it's one of the best.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it enriches. Yeah.
Stuff grows nicely in there. Okay, thanks.
Tools cleanup. This is a really great time of year because it is still a little bit beautiful, and it'll help your tools last a lot longer to make sure to strip off any dirt. The things that I find on my tools by this point in the season, I've been using them for so long, and I'm so exhausted that the shovel just kind of gets like put to the side, but it still has the little clump of dirt on the bottom of it or whatever. And those things over time, you've probably seen, they degrade tools, and the more diligent you can be about it at this time of year, the longer your tools will last. And at first it's just kind of making sure all the dirt's off of it, and whether it's scraping it or brushing it. And if you want to oil them up, especially once you're no longer going to be using them for the season, taking a little bit of like tool oil and just smearing it on the outside and then letting them rest away for the season or for the winter season. And another thing to think about is how you want to manage your managing volunteers. In the same way that you want to get out all your weeds because otherwise they're going to drop their seeds, and then you're going to have whatever it is growing there for the next however many years, or that the seeds can just wait in the soil till they have that opportunity. Over the years, I've become a really big fan of trying to swing the weed population in a certain way, or weed population. You can, by leaving plants or by taking specific plants and shaking them around certain parts of the garden, you can start to manage volunteers. So like the sorts of flowers and plants that you have popping up in your garden the next year, where you've probably had it happen with cherry tomatoes, that's one of the standards of like, there's cherry tomatoes around next year.
Yeah.
But you can do it with marigolds and petunias and all sorts of things that will happily volunteer themselves the next year. But it's just a matter of either letting a couple of those plants stay in that spot, or taking those seeds and then kind of sprinkling them around at this time of year wherever you want them the next year. I mean, sunflowers do this really, really well. As a matter of fact, it's hard to not have sunflowers volunteering themselves the next year. But with that, you then can actually start to fill in within your gardens spaces that get taken up by weeds can actually be desirable things. Yeah, but this is a good time of the year to think about that. And the seeds also, since we're talking about breaking up plants and that sort of thing, if you want to grow poppies, or if you want to grow chamomile, or a lot of these cool season annuals, or short-lived or like, yeah, I guess biennials. Let's just go with annuals. This is the time of year to do it, and you can just sprinkle out poppy seeds on bare soil, and it seems as if every time I do it, it feels impossible. I mean, a lot of seeds are that way, like putting it into the ground, and it's just this little thing, but it always works. This really is the time of year for especially poppies. And mulching, like I was talking about before, it doesn't have to, like we were talking about wood chips before, but then within the garden, straw and the chipped leaves or grass clippings are another really, really good one. Any of those last grass clippings that you have, you can even toss them on green if you need to. It's just anything to put a nice blanket over it.
What about pine needles, are they too acidic?
Pine needles are what they are extremely acidic, but if you only use, let's say you use pine needles as one application of a mulch in 1 year or something like that, and you put down whatever, half inch to an inch of them. While they're very acidic, the soil is so far from their level of acidity that the soil won't be changed much by those pine needles at the top. It takes many, many years. So the reason that under there it's a very, very acidic settings is because that tree
has been doing exactly that for every year, just dropping them, and then you give it 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and then you have soil that is very, very acidic. But yeah, I wouldn't be afraid of it. Some of the evergreens around here, the more prickly they are, the less I enjoy working with them. So, like, the junipers can sometimes be really prickly, and then the next year when they dry, they hurt. But with especially white pine, they're so soft that yeah. Or you could toss them through the compost pile. It'd be the same sort of But
Well, I put some on my strawberry plants and they didn't do too well this year.
okay.
I don't know, because maybe it's too much acid.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
They only,
Well-
they only just got this high all year, and then of course the deer finished them off later. I had no strawberries over, the plants were, the year before, they did very well, I didn't use any pine needles,
Okay.
but this past year, you know, they didn't do well at all.
I wonder. Yeah, I mean in that initial drain, because also strawberries live in the very, very top part of the soil, and they don't really send their roots down too deep, and so there's a chance that if it was like thick enough and then it was fresh enough needles, dried but fresh, that it could have let off some terpene or some sort of
I have some
resins
new
or something.
strawberry plants, how should I cover that one? I'm not gonna put pine needles on them.
The which
I have
plants?
some new strawberry
Okay.
plants that I just planted last week, that
Oh,
somebody
okay.
gave us
I would use some sort of straw.
straw.
Yeah, you could use leaves too, chipped up leaves,
Yeah, I have
and try to
pine
get
leaves.
them in between. If you can flap some of those leaves over, and then yeah, just let them try to settle in. Hopefully, they'll settle in before it gets too cold. And if they still seem unhappy when gets really, really cold, you can even just toss some more leaves over top of it. Alrighty. So yes, on to garlic. Who grows garlic? Grow garlic? Do you grow garlic?
I want to.
You want to? You planning on it or?
I'll do what everybody else does, I just go right along with it.
It's the best way. It is the best way to do it.
It's
I
so
don't
good.
know about everybody else.
I've been hearing something about
It's pretty
jumping off
easy
bridges.
and
Yeah.
it's pretty satisfying and, you know, when you get that
Do you
bulk,
plant
know.
garlic?
I
No?
I've had people
Okay.
that vote on it, they really
I tried.
Are you interested in it?
Oh yeah, we love it.
No.
No.
Okay.
Well, she likes to give it away, we have company.
Did you
tried it,
grow
it
that
didn't work.
garlic?
I did.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
Thank you. It won the Ulster County Fair this year, so I felt like if I'm going to be talking about this is how you could grow better garlic, I needed to have something there, because otherwise,
What's the
what
name
am I
of that?
doing? This is German white, or also gets called German stiffneck, or there's a bunch of different
Yeah, we
names.
just
No,
planted
really.
that.
This is a
That's gorgeous.
fantastic.
Well,
It's
we
big,
bought
beautiful
it isn't
plants.
as nice as that.
Well, so garlic, I've now been growing garlic for, this will be the 13th season. And garlic is one of those ones that, it seems so simple because all you need to do is take a clove, you just plop it into the ground, cover it over, come back the next year, and come July, you will have some garlic growing there.
Except for me.
Oh, I mean, there's a chance that it can die,
Yeah.
but then there's also a chance that, or a good chance that clove will only turn into something teeny tiny.
What
Because
causes the teeny tiny?
because most of the work for garlic to be able to grow, for the garlic to get this big or to be that healthy, the work happens now, and for like the past maybe month or two, where the secret is compost. You can get soil tests are a useful way of getting a sense of where your soil is exactly, but organic material, garlic came from, or wild garlic, evolved in such just miserable growing conditions. I mean, rocky, barely any nutrients, like frozen for part of the year, desert for part of the year, and so it is a plant that is capable of scavenging just an amazing number of nutrients. Reaches surprisingly far down into the soil, and if you just put a lot of compost on the soil, work it in a little bit and that sort of bit, over the year, it might not happen the very first year just because the organic material needs a chance to actually work its way into the soil. But if you want to grow garlic like this, the way to actually do it is pick a bed at some point in a bed that you're not going to be using in summer, let's say, or that is like can kind of sit open. Put tons of compost onto it, or even late summer, like early. Put maybe an inch, 2 inches of compost on it. Put some mulch, just let it sit. Let the worms go to town, and they'll work up and down and up and down. You have
Well, like
chickens. Eggshells is another good one to toss in.
Like
with it.
you harvest that in July.
Yes.
So like we have a bed that we would harvest it, and then after we pull the garlic up, then put the compost. We could use that same bed again, or should I?
I would recommend using a different one. Garlic
Mm.
and alliums, onions, or chives, alliums, leeks, garlic. They have a lot of diseases and insects that the best way to do it is to at least try to shift to another one. If you're putting that much compost in, I tend to believe that you're putting enough.
No, I
of
haven't
other-
yet. I haven't done that at all. The compost, but I'm just
Okay.
like, is that when I would put it in after, or I shouldn't use the same bed again? Or you're
Probably
saying 'cause
shouldn't.
you
You
have to put, 'cause
shouldn't
you have to
use
put
the
that.
same. Yeah. That
Okay.
usually when I pull out garlic, I use wherever I pull the garlic out of, I use that for my winter crops, and so or fall winter crops. So that's for lettuce and spinaches and kales and broccolis and that sort of thing, where you can start those seeds right at about the time that these are coming out of the ground, or you
Mhm.
can even direct seed them, and then that way that same bed can be used. But even if you don't have a bed that's just empty and sitting empty, it's just a heavy application of compost, and the more compost you put on there, eggshells, they like calcium, things like that. Compost, and let it sit for as long as possible to just let the biology of the soil actually suck it down into it. And then planting. I mean, sounds like you just planted a whole bunch of it.
Like right now, but I put it in the same place that we planted it last year. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's you learn. You'll see what the results were, because
And
it could all turn out
when
fine.
you cut the scape, is that what makes the bulb bigger too? Like when you cut that scape?
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I usually cut it once it starts to curl, because if you cut it when it's first shooting out, it'll still keep growing and you'll get curls and things like that. But yeah, that helps to redirect. And then once you planted it, make sure there's mulch on it. It's a big one to get at least.
What's the best mulch for the garlic?
I bought straw.
I
That's what my
use
plan was.
Straw can work. I wind up using chipped leaf, about this much. I guess 2 inches of chipped up leaves, and then I take the last mowing of the yard and field, and then toss those on top of those leaves to kind of weight them down and hold them in place, and it works great. Because we live in a zone 6 now, and so you don't need to plant your garlic 5 inches deep or anything like that, because we're pretty, and especially once you put mulch over top of them.
How deep do you plant your garlic?
The bigger cloves, sometimes I'll go a little bit further down, but they're usually 2 to 3 inches, something like that.
That's what we did.
Yeah.
That's something right.
Is there points or flat?
Oh yes, you always want to make sure to be pointing the tip upwards. And if you've worked with garlic in the kitchen, you've seen where the green starts to pop out of that top. That's up. And there's usually like a little flat or like basal plate at the bottom, and that gets pointed downwards. But yeah, garlic and a lot of these other things. Actually, bulbs work off of a very similar thing, but they're nowhere near. When I say bulbs, these are bulbs, but I'm talking about tulips and narcissi and all that fun stuff. Um, they operate in a really similar way. It's just that you don't really need to add that much compost. They don't need that much fertility. But you're going to be planting those in a similar. Do you guys grow ornamental bulbs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then I feel it. I've been talking about garlic, and I felt bad because if you're not growing garlic, but ornamental bulbs, same sort of thing. But again, they just aren't nearly as demanding in terms of nutrients, but the same putting it down however many inches, and some of them you're putting barely below the surface, and then there's a few that get 5 inches down below it, and that nice mulch over the top. It serves as an amazing blanket. And there are bulb fertilizers and things, but as long as the soil isn't completely barren, and if you're working in pots, then it's refreshed. But yeah, it's basically the same thing.
When do you plant bulbs? All bulbs aren't planted at the same time, right? Some are planted in the spring, some are planted in the fall.
There are spring planted bulbs. The stuff I'm talking about right now, that most bulbs are fall planted, or at least hardy bulbs are fall planted. Yeah, you want to stick it in sometime, or also the time to stick it in is usually like 4 to 6 weeks before a freeze, before the ground tends to get too cold, because garlic and bulbs, if the ground isn't frozen, even when you're shivering outside because it's 20 something degrees, the bulbs are actually growing actively and shooting roots down into the soil and starting to get gathering up nutrients. And this is the middle of January or February, if there's like a little bit of a thaw out, or so we're still shivering and and they are setting about, but that's why they're ready to pop up. Snowdrops and galanthus are popping up when there's actually still snow on the ground. And part of why I love garlic so much, or why I love bulbs so much, is it's like you do the work way in advance, and then you just get to finally enjoy something in the spring without having to do all that much. Like in the garden, garlic is just glorious for like the first 2 months or 3 months, because everything else is so teeny tiny and measly, and like nothing really looks all that good yet. It takes so many months, whereas these are this tall and proud and green and everything. Another thing on this is nitrogen fertilizer. So come springtime, you can add nitrogen fertilizers now. I always go with organic, but in the springtime they like feeding nitrogen, and so that could be fish emulsions and just high nitrogen fertilizers. But you want to stop it before they start to send up those little scapes. And so it's really just for the first, when they pop out of the ground, you can start, and then for maybe that first month, and then they're all good, and you just wait until you pull it out of the ground and see how it worked out. And then with ornamental bulbs, that's another that you can usually I'd say the best foliar fertilizer times, or times to apply, is after if they're oh shoot, there's just so many bulbs. Sometimes it'd be before or after. If you were gonna do a foliar feed, I would say probably. No, I can't even give a recommendation on that. I'm sorry. But a basic fertilizer, if you're swapping out, if they're all going into pots,
Yeah.
then bulb fertilizers work great.
Daffodils and gladiolus, you plant them in the spring?
Daffodils get planted now.
We do.
Yeah, and then gladioli. Most gladioli aren't hardy here, and so they get planted in the springtime. But there are there's one species, and I think that there's at least one species that is hardy to here that does get planted at this time of year. Forgetting the botanic name for it, but they're really pretty. It's like purplish sort of flowers. 32. So, questions?
How do you get your garlic so it's so clean and
I mean, you don't
Yeah.
wash it, you don't wanna wet it, right?
No,
Yeah.
never wash it. There's layer after layer of like skins that form on the outside, and so this is probably it's one or two skins in, and so the outer skin, when it first came out of the ground, had dirt on it, but then once it dried off a little bit, and just kind of taking the outer skin away, or you
I've
can.
done that, but still that's beautiful.
You see, that's kind of the remnant of the last
Yeah.
skin there, and so yeah, it's just a matter of taking those off until you
I
eventually get
forget,
down to
we
something.
bought 10 pounds of garlic. And that looks, to me, it's top grade.
Thank you. I'm proud of it. Oh, and then this book, Growing Great Garlic. This is the considered like the Bible of small garlic growing, and it has everything that you would ever need to know and a lot more. But yeah.
Perennials that are in pots or containers, do you have to worry about them not freezing because they're all exposed? It's not like they're in the ground.
That's a good question. Kind of depends on the perennial, but let's see, if you have nursery stock that's in a pot that you eventually want to put into the ground and make it a lot bigger, the best thing to do is to actually either pile up mulch around it and kind of protect a little bit around the pot area, or you can actually dig a trench and then set those into the trench in order to, you can kind of tilt them off to the side a little bit. But yeah, it's just about protecting or keeping that in the ground. But
Because right
some
now I
perennials
have two rhubarb plants
Okay,
in
rhubarb.
a container.
okay.
I thought I could, keep them from being eaten by the deer, but they still almost came up on the porch and ate them. Anyway, should I surround them with something?
That's hard. Rhubarb's a really, really tough plant, like a real tough plant.
A tough
so,
plant to grow in a pot, you mean, or?
I
Or
mean,
just a
in
plant
it
to grow?
constitutionally, it is
Oh,
it's a rough and tough plant.
Yeah.
Once it gets itself going, it just goes and goes and goes.
It loves lots of cow manure.
Okay, we started one, well, we had a couple and they didn't, I moved it, and so this year it seems to do a lot better, so I'm hoping next year we can actually harvest it.
Yeah, once they're happy.
Rhubarb plant that I
Yeah, I planted one this year. I never had rhubarb before. I tasted it here for the first time this summer. And I put it in an earth box. And it grew, but it never got, I thought rhubarb stalks were supposed to be red.
Yeah, rhubarb is one of those. It really wants to be in the ground.
Oh, well, I'll plant it in the ground.
It's
So
it
there.
just it struggles in pots because I think rhubarb has it has thick roots that run outwards as well, but I
yeah.
believe it does send down a couple of sinker roots, and that sometimes in pots rhubarb, since the one plant in terms of like from the end of one leaf all the way through, it'll be this broad apart or across, so it's always going to be pretty limited in a pot.
I'll plant
But
it
yeah,
in
if
the
you could,
garden.
I would say put it in kind of like a sheltered spot, and it'll be fine. Like it'll survive through the winter.
Okay. All right. Any more questions for Kevin?
How about asparagus roots? I mean, can you start them this time of year? Can you put them in?
Spring would be the best time, probably. If you could get your hands on them.
I have some that I had bought, and I just never got around to planting this year. But I thought maybe that was something I could do now instead of waiting for the spring, because it would be sheltered in the ground? I didn't know.
Well, if they're still alive,
Yeah, I was gonna say, are
Oh.
they still alive?
there's a like you'd have to check
Well,
to
they
see
were
if they're
the
still alive.
dried. I mean, they never look alive when you buy them, right? I mean, they're in a
No, they
box.
should.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I'll have to check
more
on that,
likely than
yes.
not.
They're probably dead.
Probably dead at this point.
Okay.
But I would say if one of those things is alive, then you're dealing with a miracle. And so you need to
Darn it.
put your all
I just
into
didn't get
it.
around to
Oh.
doing it.
I do love
But yeah,
it.
this time of year, if one of them is still alive, or however many of them are still alive, you can still put them in the ground, because perennials. I'll let you in on another secret. This is the time most people go out shopping for trees and shrubs and perennials and all of those things in the springtime. Because as Americans, we have been trained to get really enthusiastic about it, and we go out and we buy all of this stuff and then we put it in. But that for shrubs, perennials, anything that's going to last a long time, this is actually the best time of the year to put it in. Because when you put things in the spring, or it doesn't apply to absolutely everything, but vast majority of stuff. Because if you plant things in the springtime, while it might be leafing out, you have to spend the entirety of the spring, summer, and fall watering it, making sure that it's okay, getting it babied in, and you have the blistering hot sun. Whereas if you put it in right around now, the first maybe 6 months of its life, between the snow and the cool and things, nature takes care of the watering. It's basically asleep, and when it wakes up, essentially it wakes up in the springtime and things start to thaw out, it can just start growing right into the earth. And there's not that where it started leafing and it's still in a pot and then it gets put into something else. And so that it's both the best time to do it, as well as this is the time where a lot of nurseries, and this is just for your own knowledge and for your own gardens, this is when they're clearing everything out, because it doesn't look all that good anymore. With the roots underneath them, perennials, perfectly good. It's just the upper part doesn't look inspiring anymore, and so they're looking to just clear these things out. You'll get 40, 50, 60, 75% off of things that if you want to fill a garden, again, you're not going to walk through the nursery center right now and see all of these bright colors necessarily. You'll see a lot of miserable looking plants, but as long as you know what you're looking for, this is the time to do it. And then just pop them in the ground, and especially if they're hardy to around here, they should be absolutely fine. But asparagus, they definitely won't survive till spring if
The plant, the root.
yeah,
The root
yeah,
would-
meaning like if it's
I thought
alive
it was like
now.
I thought it was more like garlic, like that looks dead, but you could plant that. You know what I mean? Like, so the roots kind of look dead.
They're oh man, they're not a rhizome.
You
They're
have to put them in water, right?
I'm
So-
forgetting the botanic
Oh,
term.
like to reconstitute them.
Yeah.
No,
I
it's
thought I read that.
they have to. What'll happen when they go into storage in small things is that they'll become slightly desiccated, and then you re-soak them before putting them into the ground, just because by being in the box for a little while, even for a week,
Oh.
they're going to start to kind of off gas and slowly become more dry. Again, I would say just look them through,
How do
see
I
you
tell
can
if they're alive or dead? Like they'll break. Or
if they just
Yeah.
crack, then yeah. But if there's still one alive, then I would say try to get it into the ground as fast as you can.
it wouldn't hurt it.
Because by springtime, you can pretty much guarantee it won't still be alive. Just in my experience, anytime I've tried to plant asparagus or do it crowns, that's what I'm thinking of, asparagus crowns. If I don't